Welcome to the Foundery, where leaders are forged daily. And now your host, George Roberts.
I love that. Sounds like there's a lot of maturity that goes along with that once you get your financial house in order. Great perspective. I want to pick up on some of those themes. But before we leave real estate, because I think there are a lot of people who are here for real estate, and hopefully one of the things this podcast will do is give them a broader perspective and look at things like entrepreneurship in general and other alternative assets. You did mention how you pick a market, and I love how you put so much work into the front end. Like, what are you really looking for? What do you want? What do you need in your life? And then how are you going to get that through some combination of appreciation, cash flow, and where the asset is located? You mentioned family members. Was your first market by any chance Columbus?
No, it wasn't actually. It was in New Jersey. It was in New Jersey. So it was, but family members were nearby. So, family members were nearby there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wondered if you'd go into more depth about one of your markets. So I'm gathering that New Jersey is a place that you maybe invested and sort of moved on from. Maybe one of your better markets, one of the markets that you still believe in. How did you pick that? What was the process? More in this case, again, you sort of went through the general. So getting down to the nuts and bolts, why A versus B?
Yeah. So when I initially made the location, I talked to you about it. Just family members were nearby. They could get there relatively quickly, right? Within an hour or so. The other, once I had built a track record of success, I realized that I didn't have enough education. So I hired a mentor, I hired a coach, helped walk me through a very specific process. And what I realized is that there is a lot of thought that goes into creating a location, because when you go to a location or a market, a lot of people say, I like to say location, but a market, you will typically go to that market and you want to deepen the relationships in that market. So a lot of work needs to be done up front. If you just go to a market and go to a market and go to a market, you end up being exhausted. So do the work and study across multiple markets. Once I learned how to do that, I really started looking at I started at the state level. So I started looking at which states had lots of Fortune 500 companies. How was the GDP of a state increasing, decreasing? Were there more people moving to a state, decreasing, or leaving a state? And then I looked at the high level. Then once I got to the states, then I started looking at a number of different cities. And when I initially did this was looking at a number of things. So you started to and it's things that I'm sure most of your listeners or audiences already heard, but I'll just reiterate it because there's nothing new under the sun, right? It's a matter of looking at, number one, also, is there growth in the market? When I say growth, is it a market where there are more people moving to that market versus leaving that market? When something that they talk about net migration, so more people moving versus leaving. If there are more people moving than leaving, then guess what? At the time, because I was thinking about real estate, then they're probably going to need a place to sleep. I then started looking at other things like, hey, listen, and I went down to the submarket level as well. I wanted to understand things like which university, were there universities, and were those universities nearby? Why is that important? Well, because if you go to a university, a lot of people, or college, you typically want to find a job that's somewhere near there. Then that took me to think about, okay, what kind of jobs are there? How many different employers are in a particular city? So it led me to start to think, are they big companies? Are they Fortune 500? Are they Fortune 1000? How diverse are they? Is it very similar? And I'm sure you know this more than most people. If you go to a specific location where there is one industry that's very dominant, that can be a very great thing when things are going well. But if that industry is hit, how is that going to affect the people that are working, not just in that industry, but any of the supply chain that feeds into that industry? And so I started looking for diversification of industries and then diversification of top employers. I also wanted to look at things like, are there sports teams in the location that I'm looking at? Most people think sports teams, why would that even matter? Well, because most of the really big organizations, whether it's Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, NBA, they've done a lot of research. The MLS, they've done a lot of research, probably spent many billions of dollars to figure out, hey, listen, is this enough are there enough people here that would be interested in the service that we have? And the last time I checked, most of those big sporting organizations, they do pretty well. So I wanted to know if there were sports teams that were in those areas. These were just some of the things, like they're not all the things. I mean, we can get down to the nitty gritty, like the absorption, consumption ratios and things like that. But those are the things that I started looking at, and I looked across different cities. It came down to a final 4 cities, Columbus, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Charlotte as MSAs. And I ultimately decided to really focus on the Charlotte MSA.
Nice, very good. And you just ticked off, I would say, probably the top 5 to 10 metrics that people are looking at. And awesome. So pause this, rewind it, do what you got to do. But if this is your first time looking at how to pick a market, I think that you just basically ticked all the boxes. So cool that Columbus is in there, because that's one of the ones that I'm looking at right now and hoping to break into. So pretty awesome. Now let's pick up some of the themes that you had a moment or two ago. And you mentioned how you became a high wage earner and you got your financial house in order, big steps along the way. You made some decisions, you deployed some assets into real estate, and you point out you didn't have to be perfect, right? You did enough research. I mean, at least figuring out you got to have some boots on the ground, et cetera. You found some places, you made some money. You didn't get wiped out, and that's important, right? You didn't have to make the perfect decision, but you did have to make a decision. So then you could get to the second round where now you're a little bit more analytic. You're looking at all of these metrics. You're looking at things that help you to get in and out of the investment, even if the economy is maybe hitting the skids, and you became big. And if I could maybe put that all under one rubric, I would say that what you got good at over that time frame is you got good at deploying capital.
Yeah, you know what? And so there was definitely, I would say, capital deployment. I would even say probably more than that, it was really being able to use a lot of the same skill set that I had developed in a successful corporate career. And what ultimately I realized is that I was really good at solving problems, and then once the problem was solved, then deployed the capital, right? Because what I see happen a lot is people will deploy capital. They don't know, they're running after yield. And you're thinking, well, but is that really solving the problem that you're trying to get to? Also, is that yield something that you understand well enough so that you can sleep well at night? Or are you going to be freaking out every day that you see or read something in the news that says this particular location is affected, and you think that every time that means either your real estate is affected, your stock portfolio is affected, your whatever is affected. And one of the things that's just really helped me is to get to solving problems. I got into real estate in the beginning because I thought I wanted real estate, but I realized that I had a control problem. And when I lost money in the stock market in 2000 and then again in 2008, I realized I had no control over the investment financial part of my life. So I needed control. I understood that rents from revenue minus operating expenses meant net operating income. If I had a mortgage to pay, then that meant that was what I was going to get, cash after debt service. And so that was very simple. So once I was able to solve that control problem, real estate solved that for me. Right. When I was looking to solve another problem, which was, hey, listen, I wanted to have more consistent income, then I invested in ATM machines. Right. And then I invested in development projects. I understood that I can invest $200,000-$300,000 with other people, and then I didn't actually have to do the work. The syndicators were actually doing all the work, and I just got that benefit from it. So, there were a number of different things that were going on. And then as a high wage earner, I also had a lot of earned income that I was getting these efficient passive investments through real estate and things like that. But then I was still paying 40+% in tax. And so I had to figure out what is the way that I can actually get out there and figure if there's a way that I can also start to right size some of the tax obligation that I had on that. So I would say once I solved the problem, it was then about being able to deploy the capital.
Right. And I love that. It's all about asking the right questions. So you're analytic, you know how to find the right answers, but it looks like you've also spent a lot of time doing the work to make sure you're asking the right questions. And another thing that I noticed in there is that you're not just going at it from the financial angle, very important. You got to make sure the numbers work, but you're talking about solving problems. And that's really something very important. You're taking it another level there. You're looking at more like the entrepreneur. And we look at those metrics like where's the job growth, the population growth, where are the single family home prices increasing? Those are the areas where you're going to find that people are just priced out of the housing market, or you just have so many people coming that you're not going to have enough housing. And when people are able to be agile and nimble like that, you can solve the problem before people really get into trouble in an area.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know we need to move on, and I'm sorry, I just realized how much fun I've been having. We got like 40 minutes into this, and I always tell myself at the outset, you know what, George, you're going to be disciplined this time. You're just going to hit 2 or 3 points. We're going to do a 20-minute interview, and we're just going to get like in and out. We haven't even talked about, I know you just mentioned your podcast going long. We're going to have to hit that really quickly. But
yeah, man, sure.
Deploying capital, what I was really aiming for, and I know you're just, it's on the tip of your tongue. You're ready to tell us that you've gone into other things after real estate or in addition to real estate. So tell us how that helped us solve your problems and move you forward.
Yeah. So George, one of the things that I believe happens is when we're informed, right? And it's one of the things one of my mentors, Russell Gray, he says, if you want to get better answers, you have to ask better questions. Right. And so I'm a big believer in that. And so many times as I started to get into real estate, and I enjoy real estate, I will continue to invest in real estate because I believe it is one of the most powerful vehicles. It is not the only vehicle to help you get to your destination, because I use multiple vehicles, right? We were just talking about that before. But one of the biggest challenges I had is someone who was an accredited investor, who was extremely busy in my job. I wanted to, create that runway for myself. And so I was investing a lot in the types of investments that generate passive income. And I don't mean income not working. I mean IRS definition of passive income. And I'm just sharing my story. I'm not giving anybody tax advice or any of that kind of stuff, of course.
Right.
But as I was deploying my capital, I wasn't necessarily asking the right questions because I kept deploying capital. But then what I started recognizing over the years is I would get my tax returns back and I was like, wow, hey, this is really kind of cool. But I saw this line that was called passive activity losses. And I was like, well, what are these passive losses? And they literally just kept building and building and building.
Right.
And one day I talked to my accountant. I was like, what's this all about? And so then we really sat down and he talked, and I got a better understanding of how I was deploying my capital, which was great because it was extremely tax efficient, putting it in passive investments like real estate. And I will continue to do real estate. But at the same time, then I was looking and I was writing my check to the government because I was getting taxed on my earned income at like 45%, 40 plus percent, let's say. And so it didn't feel right because I was investing in one side as an accredited investor. I was putting money here and I thought, well, this is all going to be, it's really tax efficient. But then I was paying on the other side. And then I started realizing, well, hang on, there's 2 different buckets actually. And so what I then started understanding to do is how can I go about releasing some of the obligation that I have from an earned income perspective? Because if I can release that obligation, then I can use that, meaning I can keep some of that money, and I can then redeploy some of that money into other types of passive incomes because that's really more tax efficient. And that's when I got into the energy sector because it helped me as a high wage earner, super busy professional that wanted to be able to maximize the benefit so I could create my runway to be able to, if whenever that day came or not, that I would not really worry about whether or not I had to continue in the corporate role. And so by investing in the energy space, specifically, it has helped me really to help me on the tax obligation that I have, and also still creating consistent conservative returns moving forward. So at the end of the day, really, once again, I'm solving another problem. I solved the control problem. I solved the more consistent cash flow problem. I solved the problem of not having to do the active work myself and passively investing with other people. And then I was able to solve the earned income problem, which was still paying high tax as an accredited investor and being able to make sure that all of these vehicles were moving in the right direction, or I could jump from vehicle to vehicle to get to the destination much faster. It took me 9 years to get there. Maybe it takes somebody else 15, 12 years. But if we don't know about the different vehicles that exist, then it's very, very challenging to understand. And because this earned income, as someone who's not a real estate professional, right? I was not a real estate professional when I was working in my corporate job, and I was a high wage earner. And I had to figure out a way to solve that problem. And that's the problem that we're really focused on solving and helping others solve today.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And again, not giving tax advice, but you got the active bucket, the passive bucket. and wanting to do as best you can in those two buckets. Really important theme, and something definitely, if those words are kind of new to you out there, definitely want to look into that, figure out where your income is coming from. Is it all W-2? You're active and you need something that's going to go and zero that out. Well, anyway, we're gonna have to hit this really fast, but we definitely want to hear about your podcast going long. Tell us, what's the theme? What are you trying to hit? Who are you serving? What's it all about?
Yeah, really, it's for, once again, it's for really, it's for high paid professionals that are very busy, that are interested in having and feeling much more comfortable and confident investing beyond their backyard. As you know, George, and we've talked about, I live here in Barcelona, Spain, and I invest exclusively back in the United States. Most people think that that is something that you absolutely cannot do. I know you invest in different locations from Michigan. And so you and I know that this is something that can be done all the time. However, most people think that you have to only invest in your backyard. And I just want to help people through the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, is help them understand that it's a mindset thing. There's a process to follow. There are people that are doing it. You're doing it. I'm doing it. It's just a matter of being exposed to how you can do it. And you can be an active investor, somebody like me. You can be a passive investor, somebody like me. The process is the same. It's just about being exposed to it. And when I got started with the podcast, I wasn't really hearing a lot of people talk about long distance investing or remote investing and things like that. It's becoming more and more commonplace, but this is just a great place to go and listen to people that have done it and have amazing success stories, a lot of mistakes. And so if you want to avoid a lot of the mistakes, it's a great podcast to listen to, especially if you are interested in really doing remote investing. So that's it.
All right, beautiful. So not that there aren't a million things we could still discuss, but we got
I want to keep on talking
so
to you.
let's
Yeah.
head into the lightning rounds, okay?
Let's do it.
All right. Tell us something about one of your real estate markets that most people wouldn't know.
Wow. So one of the locations is Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know if a lot of people know that the Charlotte Panthers have moved to a place called Rock Hill, so just outside of Charlotte, so over in North Carolina or in South Carolina. They've moved their facilities there. They still play in North Carolina, but they moved their facilities south. Yeah.
What is some advice you would give your younger self?
Use more of the money that's in the bank. Even though you need it because as a child you didn't have much, it's okay. Release it sooner because it will allow you to have freedom of choice sooner.
Love it. So you're not big on that giant cash position.
No, and it's one of those things that I fight against because as a kid I didn't have much cash, and so by default I want to see it there because it makes me feel better. But the reality is when it's sitting in the bank, it's eroding. And so you have to get to a point where it's enough to keep you comfortable, but don't just have a bunch of money in the bank. It's a losing proposition.
Love it. Love it. I wish I could tab over to my finances. I tell you my cash position, but let's just say I'm running on fumes. I want it all invested.
Very good, man. Very good, man.
All right. Okay. So what is the best investing advice that you've ever received, or what investing advice would you give us in closing?
I would say that you can't think about investing. Like, it is not a theoretical exercise. You have to get involved in investing. That means you have to get educated, get around the network that's going to allow you to then move and get money in the game. If you do not get money in the game, it's not possible to be an investor. Like, you have to get educated, get a network, and invest your capital, and then find out how it is moving, figure out what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, and test the boundaries. Because if not, you're just going to keep money in the bank, and that's a losing proposition, man. It's just not going to work.
Perfect. And what's the worst investing advice that you've ever received, or what's a mistake that you'd like to help others avoid?
Do not ever. So I talk about this metric that a lot of people have probably never heard of. A lot of people talk about you got to get the IRR, the highest IRR, the best NPV, the best cash on cash. And those are great metrics. But the one metric that nobody talks about, George, and I've got a lot of passion about this, is the ROS. Like, nobody talks about the ROS. And so everybody needs to be talking about ROS, because if you're not, then you're setting yourself up for failure. The ROS is quite simply, because I can tell you're getting ready to ask me, is return on sleep. You must have a positive ROS. If it is not positive, it does not matter what the yield is. It does not matter what the benefits are. If you're going to place capital and you can't sleep at night because you're so worried about placing the capital, don't do it. It doesn't matter, because what you lose in sleep will be far greater than the return that you thought you were going to receive. So with that ROS positive, you have to do that, but do not invest in anything that you don't understand, because that will make your ROS negative. I did that. It was miserable. And because I wanted to place capital with somebody that was a friend of a friend, and I thought that I would be cool doing that. And it was like the worst thing that I could have done. And because I lived through that painful experience, fortunately, I didn't lose my money, but I realized like it doesn't matter. And I ask every question. And if I can't get the person that wants my capital to answer the question in the way that makes the most sense for me, I don't place my capital. Simple. And it's just that simple.
Name a book that's helped to forge you as a leader and as an entrepreneur.
First Break All the Rules, Marcus Buckingham. Changed my whole philosophy on, because I used to think management was leadership, and I know entrepreneurship, there's a combination, but I believe that leadership at the end of the day is the thing that moves everything forward, because you can have amazing processes, but if you're not able to create the environment so that your team is able to execute on the vision that you set forward, it's really challenging. And when I read that book, and then I have a great mentor who gave me follow-up lessons and real life experience from that book and from his life, it was just, that book made a big difference on me from an entrepreneurial perspective, and also making the transition as a manager to a leader.
Send us out with your favorite quote.
My favorite quote, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the favorite quote, but it's the one that is, I think, as you and I are having this conversation, the one that comes to my mind is start before you're ready, because that breaks the whole analysis paralysis. It ties into what we were talking about before, the 40-70 principle. And you're never going to, if you think you're going to leave your house only when all the lights are green, you will never leave your house. So you have to start before you're ready.
Okay, amazing. Now I have to just ask, how can we find you online?
Yeah, so the best way, and George, this is pretty new, so you can go to firstgencp.com. When you're there at firstgencp.com, you can find out more about us, what we're doing, who we're helping. We have a lot of focus today on helping the accredited investors, specifically those that are having issues with their earned income. We talked about that. There is a tab there, invest, if you're interested in finding out more. We can find out more about you, see if it makes sense. Also, there's educational information, blogs, firstgencp.com. We'd love to have you go over and check us out. Also, George, I love connecting with people as well on LinkedIn. You can find me there at LinkedIn, Billy Keels. I think I'm the only Billy Keels in Barcelona, Spain. So look me up there. Let me know that you heard George and I having the conversation here today. And I'd love to keep the conversation moving forward. And George, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and share just a little bit of my story. And hopefully this has added some value to someone today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. You made it easy, Billy. You have such a wonderful story and such a way of telling it. All I had to do was just sit here and draw it out a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thanks, George.